Derby County are set for a summer rebuild, but which players should stay and which players should go? Over the course of this season, we've seen a wide range of good and bad performances from this squad, and we've also seen a range of players head out on loan. But which players do I believe it should stay at the end of their contract, and which players do I believe should go? Now, for me, Sonny Bradley and Tyrese Fornah are obvious decisions for players who are going to move on at the end of their contract. Tyrese Fornah didn't want to fight for his position under Paul Warne. Is that going to change under John Eustace? I highly doubt it. Sonny Bradley moved on to play more football, has been doing well at Wycombe Wanderers, so for me, another player who should go. Now we go on to the players who are still within the squad. Tom Barkhuizen, Connor Washington, Rohan Luthra and Kane Roof should all be set to leave the club this summer. Kane Roof has only been at the Derby County a couple of weeks and he's already out for 4 to 6 weeks, and Derby County need to make sure that doesn't happen next season. We go on to Rohan Luthra, who is a third choice goalkeeper, but with Derby County having those young keepers coming through, is it the time for one of them to get that opportunity in the role, or will he stay for the opportunity of them to go out on loan? It's a big question on the lips of many Derby County fans. I think it's a real toss-up whether Luthra should stay or go, but in my opinion, he should probably move on and potentially find himself a first-team opportunity. For me, Connor Washington and Tom Barkhuizen also fit into that category of players who must move on. For me, Tom Barkhuizen wasn't good enough towards the back end of the League One season last year and certainly hasn't hit the heights that were maybe expected of him in the Championship. Connor Washington, I don't believe, has actually made a Championship appearance this season, so for me, he needs to move on. Now, there's a couple of players who are in my 50-50 decision for this expiring contract situation, and that falls on Jeff Hendrick. At the time of recording this video, Jeff Hendrick is yet to make his debut, so I'm really unsure how this deal is going to play out. He is fit, he is available, and hopefully after the international break, and maybe in the Plymouth game just gone, he will have played. But as of yet, he has not made his debut. So for me, that decision is very 50-50. If he still has something to offer, then for me, absolutely keep him around the building. He'll be really important for those young Irish players and those other young academy players to have someone to look up to who has been there and done it as an academy player and then gone on to play at the highest level. Now, the final players whose contracts are expiring are Matt Clarke, Liam Thompson, Craig Forsyth and Kane Wilson. Now, for me, I think Matt Clarke, should we stay in the Championship, will absolutely have to sign a new deal at Derby County, and I believe it will all fall on whether we stay in the league. Now, for me, Liam Thompson is another player who should absolutely sign a new contract for Derby County. He's been revitalised under John Eustace in the past couple of games, and hopefully that can continue until the end of the season. Now, Liam Thompson may want to move on and go and find more first-team football, but for me, I think he's got an excellent opportunity under John Eustace to find a first-team regular place for Derby County. We then go on to Craig Forsyth. Now, for me, I would personally keep him, but I know for a lot of people it's going to be a massively 50-50 decision. For me, Forsyth has shown over the course of the last few weeks that he can absolutely still have an impact at this level and still be a quality defender. He scored at the weekend and put in a vital defensive display versus Coventry City on Tuesday night. Will that form continue until the end of the season? We don't know just yet, but hopefully it does. And for me, he deserves an extra year contract. What Fozzie wants, Fozzie gets, and he should stay at Derby County. Now, finally, we go on to Kane Wilson, another player similar to Matt Clarke, who I believe the whole decision on their contract will determine whether we stay in the Championship or in League One. If we go down, I think Kane Wilson will happily move on to pastures new, and I think he'll get an excellent opportunity in the Championship, and I think he'd potentially go to a top half team. Now, for me, if Derby County stay in the Championship, we absolutely have to tie him down to a new 3, 4, 5 year contract. For a player of Kane Wilson's calibre, he is absolutely unbelievable and has gone from strength to strength for Derby County since signing in the summer of 23-24. Now we go on to the contracted players who I believe should go and leave Derby County or potentially head out on loan, and there's also some 50-50 decisions in here. Now, for me, as I said earlier, Joe Ward is one of those players who I believe should move on to pastures new. The deal just hasn't quite worked at Derby County, and there's not really a lot that really is going to change. Now, he obviously suffered that difficult injury where he ripped the fat pad off his heel against Oxford back in League One, and realistically has never really found his way back fully fit and back into the side since then, which has been really disappointing. With the revolution of Kane Wilson and Ryan Nyambe being an absolute stalwart defensively, it meant that Joe Ward right now isn't necessarily needed. Obviously, in Derby County's currently injury predicament, we'd probably prefer to have Joe Ward on the bench than have him sitting in a treatment room, but that's just one of those situations that is why he should potentially move on. Now, there is a player who I think should head out on loan, and that falls on Dejan Brown. Now, Dejan Brown obviously has made a handful of appearances this season. I think it's about 18, 19. But hasn't really played many minutes. Now, for me, Dejan Brown needs consecutive starts and a lot of minutes so that he can develop his game further at the professional level. Obviously, his only loan spell has been at Gateshead, and for me, he needs an EFL League 1 or League 2 loan in a consistent starting position. Obviously, yes, he's got to earn and keep that position, but he has to play for me. If he's not going to play for Derby County, which in my opinion, in the summer, Derby County are going to go all out to bolster their firing options, then I think he needs to head out on loan. There is some 50-50 options for me. And these players are the likes of Curtis Nelson, Caden Jackson, Ben Osborne, Corey Blackett-Taylor and Nathaniel Mendez-Lang. Now, a lot of people are going to talk about Curtis Nelson and talk about the fact that if he hadn't got injured, you'd want him to stay and things like that. And obviously, yes, if he hadn't got injured. However, I believe he's now 32. Suffering a big ACL injury at that age, it's sometimes really hard to recover from. We saw with Richard Keogh, who was just a couple of years older, never got back to the same level. We've seen it with other players as well, that you just don't quite get back to the same fitness levels. Now, for me, the reason why Nelson's a 50-50 is because we can't assess him right now. We have to assess him when he returns from injury. And if he can still perform at potentially championship level, should we stay there, he should absolutely stay at the club. Now, obviously, if he can't perform and we have stayed in the championship, then he's probably a player who will potentially move on. We go on to the wingers in Caden Jackson, Corey Blackett-Taylor and Nathaniel Mendez-Lang. Now, for me, Mendez-Lang seems to have lost a little bit of his edge this season, and that's something which needs to be addressed in the summer. Our wide options just haven't been good enough this year, and that's where Corey Blackett-Taylor and Caden Jackson come in. Corey Blackett-Taylor hasn't been fit for a majority of the season, and when he has, he's only really been able to play half an hour, 40 minutes, and that's been really disappointing, because when he has played, he's been really, really good. And obviously, Caden Jackson started off really, really well, but ultimately has struggled to really keep form. And obviously, will he be able to refine that form over the course of the next few weeks? Hopefully, fingers crossed. Same for Mendez-Lang and same for Blackett-Taylor when they both return from injury. But at the moment, they're 50-50 decisions for me. And it's a decision which really is going to depend on what options Derby County can bring in those wide positions. We then go on to Ben Osborne. He's my final 50-50 of this video for me. And that's because Ben Osborne is a player who I think has real quality, and I do believe that, I know a lot of people don't see it, but there's a lot about Ben Osborne's game that I really like. He works really hard, he can be technical, and he can control a game. The problem is he just doesn't quite have a position. He's been moved around too much from left back, left wing back, central midfield, holding midfield, and he just doesn't quite have anywhere where he stays. And for me, that's the detriment to Ben Osborne's career. I think if he had a solid position, maybe he wouldn't have played as long in the Premier League, but he would have had a solid career. And to be honest with you, he has had a solid career. You can't turn away from his career. But obviously then you've got to talk about the injury record, especially this season. Yes, he's played a lot of games for Derby County, but he's also spent a lot of time on the sidelines. And when he has played, he's never really looked 100%. Now, obviously, I hope Ben Osborne can return to his former glory and find that form yet again, and hopefully find his fitness yet again heading into next season. But at this current moment in time, he's on that 50-50 chopping block for me, depending on what players we could potentially find in the summer. Now, obviously, we then go on to players who are going to stay at the club, in my opinion, and players who we shouldn't even question moving on. Falls on Jakub Zetterstrom and Josh Vickers. Two strong goalkeepers at this level. Josh Vickers being a backup, really good option. Jakub Zetterstrom has shown his quality across the course of this season. We then go on to the defenders, where you've got the likes of Ryan Niambi, Sondre Langas, Jake Rooney and Callum Elder, who I believe are all good enough to play at this level. In midfield, you've then got Ibu Adams and Kenzo Holdmine, two players who I believe are absolutely good enough for this level. They just need to play proper football. Ibu Adams has gone from strength to strength since John Eustace has come in, and Kenzo Holdmine will certainly find his level eventually. He just needs to be given that opportunity to sort of have a little bit of freedom in midfield, which realistically right now in the position we're in, we cannot give. And then obviously the only striker left and the only player left on this list is Lars Jørgen Selverson. And obviously I believe we should keep him. Now obviously we can talk about some of the youth players, the likes of Darren Robinson, the likes of Jack Thompson and players like that. And for me, if they're not playing in the first team, get them out on loan. A player like Darren Robinson, who's probably coming towards the end of his time at Derby County, I actually do believe his contract might be up this summer, is a player who probably wouldn't extend. If he's not playing in the first team and he's not being picked on the bench, and you've got the likes of Owen Eames ahead of him, Cruz Allen who's been ahead of him, Freddie Turley, and I think maybe it's time for Darren Robinson to move on to a first team role elsewhere. You can obviously have your say down in the comments. If you have not done so already, let me know your thoughts down there. Hit that subscribe button, turn on the notification bell, and I'll catch you in my next video.